Hi everybody, Adrian Plass here.
Yes, and Bridget, hello.
And this is number 247 in Sounding the Shadows. And the only reason I can remember it's 247 is because that's 147, which is the maximum snooker break, plus 100. And as I'm interested in snooker, I suppose that's helpful to me. But nobody else in the world.
No, nobody else is going to... Or maybe they are.
Anyway, that's
maybe
what it
we'll
is.
hear from people. I don't know what funny methods they use to add up to numbers. I don't know.
That's true. Yeah, 247. Yeah.
Yeah, and a little bit later than usual, because I've got a rotten cold. So if I cough during this, do forgive me. We'll try and carry on whatever.
Right. Okay. So I was thinking about something I asked you the other morning, or told you the other morning, or night rather, last thing at night when I got into bed. I said to you, and you were half asleep as you often are, and I said. I've got three friends in bed with me.
Did I react?
Not particularly, no. You just reacted as somebody who is in charge of a fool in a cage.
Who's trying to go to sleep, I
have
thought
you
you were
really?
going to say.
Right. Who would they be then? What? Two of them were George and Weedon Grossmith, and the other, it was Sherlock Holmes, which of course everybody knows about, but George and Weedon Grossmith wrote a book and illustrated a book called Diary of a Nobody.
Oh, it is one of my favourite books, but
right, which was published in the late 19th century.
I know.
Interesting.
I know, and it's the most beautiful little snapshot of life at the time, isn't it? Well, maybe not everybody's life at the time, but certainly this man, Mr.
Well, it's
Pooter's
Mr. Pooter,
life.
who is a sort of risen to middle-class status, as many people did at that time, and is desperately trying to remain respectable and become a bit more respectable, whatever that means. And it is in the form of a diary, his diary, which everybody else laughs at and thinks is ridiculous. And it's about his awful failures when he tries to move a little further than he really is able to, and about one or two successes. And it's rather sweet in a way, and thank goodness it ends with him having a really nice thing happen to him. But the thing about it is, that book is that, like Three Men in a Boat,
which is another favourite of both of us.
Jerome K. Jerome, that book, together with other books, was more an influence on me than almost anything. Certainly Jerome K. Jerome, because of his incredible knack for using laughter and tears almost seamlessly when moving from one to the other. And the humour of the diary, which is a very particular way of when you have a diarist who isn't fully aware of what he's saying.
That's it.
How it reveals him.
And you think that sort of was the basis for Adrian in the Diaries, that, somebody said...
Well, maybe,
that how could you possibly have written these things as Adrian Plass? And my point was, well, the Adrian in the book couldn't have written it.
No,
his son might have
right,
done.
Yeah,
it's a technique that a vehicle maybe that is quite an exciting one, maybe.
And I remember, I don't know if you remember this, but I was asked to go and do an interview somewhere about lots of writers at this thing were sort of taken into a corner or something, and they were recording which books have influenced you most. And when I was a boy, I was a completely Catholic reader. I just read anything that appeared in front of me. So I was reading classics and rubbish.
I think you and your brothers had full
things.
access, didn't you? To
just loads
to whatever books were lying around.
Books
really,
there were.
Not books that were suitable for 7 to 8 year olds, or books that were exactly.
And there was some very good things about that, because it meant you weren't judging anything by its cover. You just picked something up and started to read. And also at that time, somebody up the road. We lived in a road called Longmeads. Somebody up the road gave my father a collection of William books, William Brown, by Richmond
That
Compton.
was kind.
And those were the old hardback red books, which I'd never read. And I would say that that also was an absolute major. I mean, those who don't like what I write will say it's a shame you read any of those books, but for me, the humour in the William books was amazing. And my older brother sent me, or was it through the? No, I can't remember whether it was from me. He sends me a number of things, but this was the biography of Richmal Crompton,
Oh, yes.
who wrote the William books.
Yeah.
And I was
that was
very
great,
interested.
it turned out she was really nice.
Well,
I was afraid
she
she
was,
might
yeah.
hate children, or that she might.
No.
It was really, really reassuring, actually.
And very clever, and very good at using words. One of the things I loved about the William books was that she used words and phrases that I could not understand, but she used them in such a way that you could guess what they were, but they made you want to discover why they were there and what they could possibly mean. And some of the humour in those books. I remember reading the very first one, which was called Just William. That was the first one she wrote, about him taking up a New Year's resolution. And during the day after that, this man asked him to just stay in the shop for a while while he went out for something or other. So William's behind the counter, an elderly lady comes in. William has taken a resolution to be polite. So this lady refuses to pay him the amount of money that he asks for some sweets, because he's eaten some of them and hopes to get it back from her. And so she marches out, and William goes to the door and shouts out, "You old thief!" And then a pause, and then, "If you don't mind me saying so." And that little joke really tickled me, and that was a simpler form of joke. But some of the humour in those books is wonderful.
One of the things from the biography I discovered, Adrian, was that she wasn't too worried about details of the place that William and his family live. Places sort of popped up, or rather like loads of the soaps, where, I mean, you have a village and there appears to be a stranger with a knife or a gun arriving every week to disturb But I thought that was really interesting because, when you come to the Bible, especially the Gospels, there's a lot of picking about as to where exactly something happened and how can you have two different accounts that are slightly different of the same thing.
Yeah.
And it takes away from some flavour. It analyses something to a point that the flavour of it dies. It becomes nothing, really.
Well, the problem with the truth is that it thwarts all attempts to keep straight lines anywhere, whether it's politics or church or anything else. And you're absolutely right. One of the great joys of the Bible is not that it's absolutely correct and continuous in its views or its ways of approaching things. It's actually, I wouldn't say a muddle, but there's a very strong dimension of horses for courses in it.
Oh, no, what do you mean?
Well, I mean that where one thing is preached or said by somebody about how you deal with something and what the response of God to it is, you then find something else happening that shows that actually this is my view of it, is that God is always looking for opportunities to draw people to him, not to exclude them. And so I mentioned the other day John the Baptist, is he the one, or should we look for another one because he's in prison and he's miserable? And there's another bit of the Bible that says, if you doubt, you're like the waves of the wind, you're blown and tossed by the wind, and that you're worth little. Whereas what Jesus sent a message that actually lifted him.
Yes.
I think it's very helpful.
Something lifted me just yesterday. Actually, I was looking at a tiny bit of the Bible just because I needed to for something, and it's something I'd never really noticed before. It's about two men, both of whom have not done too well. If you take some of those pronouncements of Jesus, one of them, Joseph, had never had the courage, it says, although he believed in Jesus, to be open about it because he feared the Jews. Well, that's not a great disciple, is it? That wasn't going with Jesus anywhere. It was just thinking, I believe in him, but I'm too scared to say so.
Yeah.
And the other was Nicodemus, who we know came to him in the night because he didn't want anybody else to know that he'd been. Well, the little bit I was looking at, Adrian, is after Jesus had died, and obviously there he is, mangled body, likely to just be chucked away. And two men, it's almost as though they stepped out of the wings where they'd been waiting to do something that they could do because they weren't being watched by anybody. They were insignificant because of the fact that they hadn't managed to be brave during the life of Jesus.
Well, they were, after that, surprisingly brave,
They
weren't
was-
they?
well,
Or one of them was.
They were. I mean, Joseph goes to Pilate,
Exactly. Yeah.
and says, can I have the body? And I suspect that Pilate was rather pleased to think that somebody was going to pay their respects to this body.
Why do you? Oh, of
Well,
course, he found no fault
He
in him.
found no fault in him. The whole thing has been a mess up for Pilate.
Yeah.
He tried to get rid of the problem by sending him to Herod. Herod didn't find the gift very attractive, and rather like an Amazon parcel, sends him back, having ridiculed him and made a mess of it. The package is all ruined, but it's sent back. So there's Pilate. And then there's Nicodemus. And Nicodemus turns up with all the spices necessary to pay respect to the body,
And
to honour
Nicodemus
the
is
body.
the one who came to visit Jesus at night
At night,
to
yes.
find out what he was.
Creeping
and what he was
around,
saying, yeah.
trying to find it out without anybody knowing. But I suppose what really struck me, Adrian, is that in the quiet, those two men had a job. Nobody else could do it because everybody else was being watched. We know the women turned up with spices early on the third morning, but nobody would really notice women either. It wasn't Peter, it wasn't John, it wasn't the others who would have been noticed. It was two men who found that they could have a little bit part in the story at that point. And I found that very reassuring.
You think that offers hope to
I
the
think it
no-hopers?
offers
who-
hope to loads of us who don't quite manage. It's not easy. And in a world where truth changes every day, it's difficult to find an opening to be able to convey something of what is important to us, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's very hard. It must be very hard for those who believe the Bible is in some way completely infallible,
Or impenetrable, Adrian.
or inerrant, or whatever it is.
Yes.
Because, I mean, we talk about these two men, but from the Old Testament, you have Gideon, who is, some angel turns up and says, "Arise, mighty man of valor," which he wasn't. He was the least of the least, and says, "You've got to knock some temples down for God." And once Gideon has gone through a ridiculous test thing with pillows and cloth and stuff,
Fleeces and
he says, "Well, all right, I'll do it, but I'll do it at night
Yeah.
because I don't want anyone to know I've done it."
Yeah.
And obviously, I mean,
God took that,
never
didn't
mind
he?
whether the story's right or not,
No,
but
no.
within that account, that's okay.
It's okay.
Because the point was to get the thing done. Same with the two sons Jesus told the story of, where one said, "Yes, Father, I'll do what you ask me,"
That's right.
and then didn't do it. I've got a feeling we've done a bit of a shift to the first son in the way we perceive things. That if it looks okay, it's probably okay. It's a bit like,
Yes.
Jesus said, don't put the important at the top of the table, put the least important.
Yeah.
And you go to any big civic stroke Christian meeting,
Yeah.
and the mayor and the rest are at the front.
They are.
And
They are.
So
But it doesn't
wherever you-
always happen.
no, but
Some
but
people choose not to go into those places.
No, and that's absolutely fine, and I don't blame the mayor. They get put in a place where they're going to sit, but it's the broad perception of who is important and who is not important is what I mean. But also what you were saying, that there is a place for whatever you are. I think whatever you are is what I think, like those two men Joseph and Nicodemus.
Mm.
The way you see things and the things you've done that you wish you hadn't, or whatever it is, there will be a role if you wish to have one.
Well, that's right. If you
role.
think maybe I could do that, maybe I could do that.
Yeah.
You know, the danger for most of us, I think, is you think maybe somebody else could do that. But maybe they looked around and thought, who else is there? I mean, Joseph had a tomb he could offer, which was helpful. Nicodemus clearly could afford a lot of these very expensive spices, which was helpful. But they didn't have to do it. You know, they weren't told, like Gideon was told to go and knock down temples. They weren't told anything.
But I don't think they could have done it if they didn't have a passion of some kind.
Find something they could do.
That,
heartbroken that they'd let down Jesus by not ever coming out boldly, you know, while he was around. You know, it reminds me of all the regrets that we might have about not having said things to people before they die, or not having supported a project while it's still alive, and wishing that we had afterwards. But this is an encouraging story. It was to me anyway when I read it. There's always something in there that can trigger off a thinking and an idea.
Yeah, well, like we were saying the other day, you have in Revelation, you have Jesus saying, I'm knocking on the door, if you hear my voice, let me in. And another place he says, I'm knocking, knock and I'll open the door. And he's really saying, I don't care which way it goes, I'll knock or you knock. The idea is that we get together.
Yeah, we get together.
And we don't do prayer meetings, and we don't do all this stuff. We sit together and we eat together, whatever that metaphor might mean. And something will grow from that relationship that will be valuable.
And if that doesn't happen, you know, the prayer, go into your room and close the door. Go into your room and close the door. Be somewhere where you can let it out, somewhere where you can just be, and be the worst of yourself, the best of yourself, the most hopeless, the most hopeful. You know, just let it be part of your life that you're still talking. So that's another door, you know. Go into the room and close the door. In other words, it doesn't have to be a big public utterance that neither Joseph nor Nicodemus managed. It can just be a going in and saying,
just get in
is there anything
door.
I can do now? I know I've not done too well up to now. I mean, I'm sure all over the world people are feeling pretty amazed but a bit scared of what's happening at the moment, and wondering what on earth they could have done or could do. I'm sure there's many people who have been in connection with what's happening in our world. You know, could I have done this differently? I don't mean people like us. I mean people who have a voice in the situation, probably thinking, where now? What now? But there is always a something. Even if it's not going to change the world, there is the possibility that you might help somebody.
Yeah.
Isn't there?
Yes, of course there is, and we've said many times, and I believe it from the bottom of my heart, that our individual responsibility to the people close to us or who we encounter is absolutely crucial, and can be really interesting. But just going back to the Bible for a minute, I'm really interested. Three Men in a Boat, William. More serious novels, lots of different books have been helpful and influential. The Bible is completely different because it's complicated in the way you become acquainted with it, and how much you understand of it, and how much theology you understand, and how little theology you understand, or whether that's important or not, which obviously on some fundamental way it is, but
and context as well, Adrian.
Well, yes, of course.
Well, no, I mean, that is huge. I mean, context in the Old Testament meant that anything that went wrong, it attributed 100% to God. So if you could have no children, that was God's judgment on you. If your crops failed, it was God's judgment on you, a sense of continual disappointment on the part of God with his children. So there's all those things as well that we might now not say. Well, we wouldn't say, you can't have children, so that's you must have done something wrong.
Yeah.
You might say, our crops are failing because we have done something wrong, because we haven't looked after the planet. So you might find different ways to look at it, but it isn't as cut and dried as it was in the writing of the Old Testament.
No. And as soon as we learn, or we seem to learn, that Jesus is the representative, he's the living image of God.
That changes everything anyway, doesn't it?
It does. So it's not easy. And it's not always a pleasure. What we have discovered and have enjoyed, I think, is, one of my other great, I mentioned Father Brown. Father Brown in the G.K. Chesterton books, what I learned from those books over and over again was, as soon as someone presents the truth, turn it upside down, so that you can, or Chesterton actually said once that the truth... what is it? Come on, someone out there is thinking about this.
What to do with the paradox?
About the truth standing on its head. A paradox is the truth standing on its head. That's right, yeah. Right. But as far as the Bible's concerned, that is a huge aid as you go through it, to just make sure you're looking at what it actually says, and not what years of half remembering or bad teaching have seemed to.
Well, Jesus said the fulfillment of the law, didn't he? He didn't say that it was the opposite to it. He said that this is really what it's about, and picked out the two major things that it was about. Love
God, love other people. Yeah. So we've obviously found the Bible fascinating and sometimes a bit heavy going,
yes, and sometimes impenetrable,
a little bit boring and impenetrable.
Sometimes worrying. No, it's all things.
The Gospels have a power that has always drawn me and continue to draw me back, which is the fact, whatever. Be interested to know what other people think about
as
books.
Always.
Yeah. Anyway,
we'll talk to you next week.
Next week.